This is Toledo Symphony Lab, a behind-the-scenes look at the world of classical music from WGTE Public Media and your Toledo Symphony. I'm Brad Cresswell. Joining me today are the Toledo Symphony's president and CEO, Zach Vassar, principal second violin and artistic administrator, Merwin Siu, and we have a special guest returning to the panel today, that is musicologist and BGSU faculty member, Effie Papanikolaou. Welcome, Effie.
Thank you. And thank you for having me back.
Back by popular demand, for sure.
Well, thank you for coming back and considering rejoining this crazy panel of folks today.
Oh, I asked for it.
Well, it was after our discussion about Brahms and the Schumanns that we discussed this idea of Mahler, and that was one of my favorite episodes of this season, was talking through the history with you. So
last time we talked about the Schumanns, Clara and Robert, and then Johannes Brahms, who was an honorary Schumann. And now we're turning to Mahler, a big concert that's happening this weekend. It is the 17th and 18th, Friday and Saturday at 8 o'clock p.m. This is at the Toledo Museum of Art Paris-style, Alain Trudel at the podium. And it is the Mahler Symphony No. 2, also known as the Resurrection Symphony. We are going to hear a couple of singers, Sarah Schaefer and Susan Platz, as well as assembled choruses, which are coming from the community, right?
We'll be having some singers from the University of Michigan Choral Union, from the Toledo Opera Chorus, and I think, Effie, you're going to be joining as well.
Yes, I have joined already.
Wow. Before we just talk all about Mahler, let's do something that I like to call Mahler and Me, where you go around and just tell us a little bit about your personal experiences with Mahler and why you love Mahler so much. I'm assuming that you love Mahler, right? Who wants to go first, be it Zach or Effie? Let me pull up a little music for you here.
It might be a competition between Zach and me then.
Yeah.
Oh.
Why?
It's a good choice.
Why would you make us talk on top of this?
Well, because now you have to get serious for a minute.
I don't get serious. I get sentimental and nostalgic in this one.
This is the famous Adagietto.
This is from the Fifth Symphony, which is not the one we're performing this weekend, but it is the one we will perform in September to open the season. And
it also makes a nice background for Mahler and Me.
I think I'll start because this is probably a really good choice for my Mahler and Me moment. I was completely unaware of Mahler until my undergraduate years. It's not really something that high school orchestras are able to pull off often. So, but we had a very dedicated Mahlerian at McGill University. His name was Timothy Vernon. He's now, I believe, the director of Pacific Opera in Victoria.
We should say Mahlerian, like somebody who is, enjoys Mahler, right?
Not somebody who has malaria.
Yeah. Exactly. That's a good point. I hadn't even thought of that. Living in my own little world there.
That's okay.
A malaria-free world. And he imbued these scores with so much passion, and I think it's actually a wonderful way to get to know the scores is in a university setting where you're able to devote weeks upon weeks of this. And I remember really specifically being the principal second for our performance of Mahler 5 and recording that on the CBC label, and that was something that was very, very special. But it's still, I think that's my second best Mahler moment, because the Mahler Third Symphony with Tim Vernon and the McGill Symphony, it's still one of the 3 or 4 best orchestra performances that I've ever been a part of.
Who wants to go next with a Mahler moment?
I want to hear Zach's obsession.
I am obsessed. So, in case anybody doesn't know, he's my favorite composer. I had a couple life-changing moments listening to his symphonies, and my license plate says Mahler, which is something I'm really proud of.
How long have you had that license plate?
So, a funny story. When we moved back to Ohio in 2008, I had gone to the DMV, and they asked if I wanted a personalized plate. And I said, well, no. I mean, what would I choose? Is Mahler available? I had to spell it, and they said, no, somebody has it. But I could go on a waiting list. And, I don't know, 7 or 8 years passed, and I get an email. I mean, who has this? Think about it. If you still have the same email, if you're still interested in the same personal plate,
It's like a message in a bottle or something.
But I thought it was just a junk email because it was not formatted very well, and it said your personalized request is available. And it was a couple of days later, I was in traffic and admiring a personalized plate in front of me, and I said, "Oh yeah, I wonder if that Mahler request." And then it all hit me like a ton of bricks. I said, "That's what the email was," and I raced back to it. Sure enough, it was, and I ran to the DMV immediately for fear that some other Mahlerian had gotten it before me, but I got it.
You got it.
Yeah.
And then some other poor person who had it went to renew, and they were like, "Sorry, Charlie."
No, the funny thing was when I was at the DMV the first time in 2008, they said, "Well, what's Mahler?" And I said, "What knows who? Mahler? Who was Mahler?" And I said, "He's a composer." And the woman at the DMV said, "Well, did he write symphonies?" And I said, "Did he write symphonies?" And she said, "Why don't you just choose like Mahler 1, Mahler 2, Mahler 3?" And I said, "I could not choose one." So I wouldn't allow myself to have the regret.
Okay, so you don't like one.
Oh. So she was trying to help you out. It's kind of like a password where you put your name in
and a number and an exclamation point
or something. Yeah.
So yeah, that's extended story about my license plate, but it was a performance of the third that just really kind of changed the way I think about music. Going through unfamiliar music. My dad had once upon a time discouraged me from exploring Mahler because it was a little too grown up, and it wouldn't sound very good on my Fisher-Price stereo. And I would steal a recording from their collection, run it up to my bedroom and listen to it. And I remember with shaky hands putting it on my turntable and fear of getting caught for listening to Mahler. I mean, how silly is that? And I probably put on like the second side because these symphonies are so long. They were many albums long. And it started in the middle of an explosion, that would go into the next part of the album. And it sounded like grown-up music, so I was afraid that somebody was going to hear it and then come racing into my bedroom and yank it off of the turntable. So it was only as a high schooler that I heard Mahler for the first time, and it was the Third Symphony. And I just remember having tears flooding down my cheeks and having to look up at the peristyle ceiling just because I couldn't take any more input.
Yeah.
I had to take at least sight away. And it was a life-changing moment.
Well, it's powerful enough to listen to the music, just like even like we're doing in the background. It grabs your attention every once in a while. But to sit in a theater and to have the sound wash over you in a communal experience with other audience goers, that is just an epic experience that you can't duplicate in any other fashion. And that's what we're going to get this weekend.
It's an oral spectacle, I think. That's one of the terms that goes through my mind. And there's a sense that if you have every instrument in the orchestra playing at the same time, that can actually sound really bad. But he manages it somehow, and I love it. So,
you're up, Effie. Let's hear your Mahler and Me story.
I have so many. I don't know how far back I want to go. I learned about Mahler, of course, through my music studies back when I was in Greece. And I had never listened to a Mahler piece other than something that I would catch on the radio every now and then because LPs were very expensive. And when I went to college, it was the first recording I ever bought for myself with a lot of money that I know I paid. I remember the recording. It was an LP of Bernard Haitink conducting the Concertgebouw. And I think that was my initial musicological entry because I was listening to the music, but I was also interested in reading the program notes included in the recording.
Yeah.
And that's how I realized, oh my gosh, there is so much history that goes with this piece. I want to find out more and I want to learn more. And that was the bug. And then, of course, when I came to the United States and I was at the program at Boston University, in the PhD program, and I was looking for a topic for my dissertation, the number one topic was Mahler. I had the sense not to delve into Mahler for my entire dissertation, but it's there. I talked about the Eighth Symphony as part of my dissertation. I had the opportunity to perform the Second Symphony under Gilbert Kaplan, a very odd choice, as maybe we will discuss later. But he came to Boston University to conduct the chorus and orchestra, and I made everything possible to be in the chorus and sing the Second Symphony, as I will again. And I have, in terms of performances, because my life since then, of course, has been a lot of research about Mahler and his life, and Alma Mahler, which is another obsession of mine. The most memorable performance, though, that I have is having been invited in 2011 to go to Vienna and participate in a Mahler festival. And I remember I gave a paper on Mahler, but it was an all Mahlerian concert anyway, an all Mahlerian conference. And they had invited Michael Tilson Thomas with the San Francisco Symphony to perform Mahler's Ninth.
Wow.
I don't remember a more transcendent performance than that. And of course, the Ninth is absolutely heavenly from beginning to end. But then to have that orchestra and MTT in Vienna at that very special place, it was the unforgettable experience for me.
Well, let's take a quick break because it is that time of year at WGTE. We're going to take a quick little break and let the folks ask you for your donations to support programs like this one here on FM 91. And if you're listening on the podcast, hey, this is as good a time as any to call up or to log on and support your public radio station, WGTE.org or 866-380-4664. And thanks. And we're back with our Mahler Resurrection podcast today on Toledo Symphony Lab. That's the opening of the Resurrection Symphony. I'm joined here by Merwin Siu, Zach Vassar, and Effie Papanikolaou, and we're talking about Mahler and Mahler's Second Symphony specifically. The beginning of this sounds to me a little bit like the opening to Die Walküre, right? And that little, the tremolo strings. There's also a little bit of Earl Koenig in there, and a little bit of like the Mexican hat dance, you know?
Wow. I'll never hear
so
it
many
the same
different
way.
things.
Going
right
away from that for just a second, there's a wonderful story. There's a wonderful story about Mahler and Die Walküre.
That was my musicological analysis. How'd I do, Effie? What do you think? If I wrote my paper on Mahler?
I'm not going to say anything because I need to be on your good side. So.
No, you don't. That's okay.
It's such opening, though. It captures your attention, much like Beethoven 5.
Yeah.
And you know that it's going to be a different symphony. You compare this to the opening of the First Symphony or the opening of any of the other Mahlers, honestly.
Yeah.
This one is just drags you into this sort of chuntering, strangling theme, and it moves up and down and always keeps coming back. It's just outstanding.
It's funny that you mentioned Die Walküre because he was conducting it right around the time he was starting to sketch this first movement. And there was this very famous performance where the prompter's box caught on fire.
Wow.
And I always thought that, like...
It's appropriate.
I mean, for Die Walküre, it should be easy, right? There's lots of water around. Everything should be fine, but it wasn't. They had to stop the performance.
You could just skip to the end of Goethe Dämmerung and bring on the Rhine.
Yeah, but then they actually kept going. It's like, okay, well, fire's out. Let's keep going. And then it was a very, very famous performance. And, I think Mahler's so famous for introducing Wagner to so many different audiences.
Yeah.
But
well, we have to remember him as an opera conductor and what a huge influence that always had on his symphonies.
I want to come back to that concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Effie, what do you have for us?
What do I have for you?
I mean, you have a lot of stuff to talk about, I know, so I'm just going to let you have the soapbox for a few minutes here.
For a few minutes, yes, thank you. This movement had a little bit of extra musical association for him. He called it the funeral rites, Totenfeier. And when he composed this first movement, he was very excited about it. And he played it for Hans von Bülow. And I don't remember if we talked about Hans von Bülow before, but Hans von Bülow was a very famous conductor and pianist. He was Franz Liszt's piano student, very famous for premiering Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto. He was also an amazing conductor and proponent of Wagner's music.
Yeah, but everybody remembers him as, the first husband of Cosima.
Of Cosima, right, because he eventually married one of Liszt's daughters, right. That's a whole... We have to have an entire show here on Hans von Bülow. He's an amazing person.
But Zach is rolling his eyes because I always go straight for the,
You go straight for the love triangle.
Yeah,
I love it.
Exactly. Straight for the gossip. Anyway, all gossip aside.
Well, what happens next is not actually gossip, it's reality. Hans von Bülow was kind of Mahler's idol in many ways, and he was looking up to him as a conductor as well. So he played the first movement, and von Bülow looked at him and said, "If this is music, I don't know anything about music."
Wow.
And he had some other choice words to say to him.
Is that like a compliment or a not compliment?
No.
He was covering his ears.
It's sort of like when somebody plays for you and you're like, I've never heard anything like it, right?
Yeah, it was a little more pointed than that. Yeah. Mahler was devastated. He was devastated. And some scholars have attributed his delay in continuing with the symphony to the fact that Hans von Bülow really didn't like what he heard.
Yeah.
The delay was years. I mean, it was
years.
Real writer's block.
Right. He had written already the second and the third movements. He didn't know how to finish it. And also, how do you finish a work when you start with a death? Usually death comes at the end, right? But when the first movement is about death, where do you go from there?
Was the first movement written with the concept of resurrection in mind, or was that applied later?
Not at all.
I was going to say, that's where you go from death.
Yeah.
That's where you go. But
Yeah.
probably he didn't know that at the time. And it was again because of Bülow, ironically, that he came up with the idea of resurrection, because Bülow in 1894 died.
Helpfully.
Helpfully. So Mahler went to his funeral. And at his funeral, he heard this choir sing the text that opens the fifth, the vocal part, the chorus part of the fifth movement. Auferstehen, auferstehen, you will rise, yes, you will rise, sung by a choir. And all of a sudden, Mahler is consumed by this idea of resurrection.
Yeah.
And there are reports, and we see it in his letters too, where he goes outside and he runs to his room and he starts writing down music. And he comes out and he talks to his friends and he says, I have it. Now my symphony is complete. So after this writer's block between the third movement and the fifth movement, then he had the fifth movement and he went back and he said to himself, okay, maybe I need to transition seamlessly between the third movement and the fifth movement about the resurrection, and I need a movement there that is going to provide this link. And that's why he included then one of his Wunderhorn songs, Urlicht.
So he wrote it 1, 2, 3, 5, 4.
5/4.
That's incredible. I've always wondered why that is sitting where it does.
He had already composed the song, but it
Right.
was for piano, and then he decided to orchestrate
Well, but
it.
the third movement's also a Wunderhorn song.
But without text.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I think it's fascinating that you hear these recordings and you hear these performances and they seem so inevitable. Like, oh, well, this has to have been the way he conceived it. And it's amazing to me that Mahler was like, should I flip the second and third movements?
Yeah.
He was quite uncertain about like the ordering of his movements, not just for this symphony, for the third symphony as well. And then like, to me, it's always astonishing that he wrote the third symphony. He's like, I think I need another half hour at the beginning. and then just like,
Yeah.
it's just stunning to me.
And if you look here at the facsimile, at the end of the third movement, he has in blue letters in his handwriting, coda.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, there is no coda to
Yeah.
the third movement.
Yeah.
And if he actually wanted to write coda to the end of the third movement, it would have been an even more gigantic piece.
Yeah. I mean, how long is this symphony generally? 70 minutes or so?
No, 90
I'd say 90
95,
minutes. Yeah,
90
minutes.
It's a
90.
2-disc set.
70, 90. I mean, that's a coda right there. If you do it with a coda or without a coda. And Effie, you brought in this big tome, this gigantic reproduction of the original manuscript, right?
Right, of his handwritten manuscript.
And you've got all kinds of little Post-it notes sticking out from there. What are all those? Are those your annotations that you have, or?
When I was going through this tome, as you said, I just couldn't take my eyes off of all the information. And it's not just the information that more or less after 25 years is familiar to me, but it's always the details that get me. There are so many details, and when you look at the score, because he conducted from the score, we have his own handwritten annotations, and we can see him struggling sometimes, and he will change something, and then you go to the printed score and you say, oh yeah, yes, when it was printed, it was changed because he made that change before he conducted the score. And yeah, that change makes sense.
Wow.
He was constantly revising. And of course, all of us who have been through Mahler's scores, we know that he's always very detailed about how you should perform the music. He always gives directions to the conductor, to the horn players, to the violin players, to the entire orchestra. Do it this way, do it that way. It's not just your regular Italian or even German annotations about tempo and dynamics. It's play
Raise
like
your bell.
this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is where I go to his opera opera experience, because he would have offstage brass. He would have the orchestra performing on their instruments in unique ways. He gave a lot of information about exactly what he was looking for. He never recorded any of his music. It would have been very early recordings if he did. But that's almost maddening, because despite all of this clarity of expectation, there's still a huge amount of space for interpretation.
I
as
wonder
a
if
conductor.
Mahler was at all forgiving about conductors interpreting his scores, or if this was almost like this sort of manic need to control the performances, because Mahler himself as a conductor was very open to reinterpreting other people's scores. He
rewrote Beethoven's Ninth.
Yeah, I mean, he had very few qualms about doing this, and it's always actually been really interesting to me that we so comfortably always perform Mahler in German. And when he was in Hungary, he would translate all of the operas to Hungarian, so that people would understand all of the text. And it's like the idea that somebody would do that to a Mahler movement it seems sacrilegious. But the idea that he would have done that to Bellini, like to to perform Bellini or to perform Verdi in Hungarian also seems pretty wrong, but he felt very comfortable doing that. And I wonder what he would have thought about...
But the only people who would be conducting it in his lifetime were his acolytes. So,
But then again, if he had lived for another 30 years, we would have much more of a record as far as his wishes go.
Yeah.
But we have information that sometimes he didn't like somebody's performances of his music, and he would say that.
Yeah.
And in just one case, I remember a conductor had a good suggestion for him, which was very brave to go up to Mahler and say, what if I do it this way?
Hey, guys.
And Mahler agreed. And he wrote him a very warm letter in which he said, I really liked your suggestion and thank you for saying that.
Wow.
Yeah.
But that was, I'm sure that was a rare occurrence.
Very rare. Very rare.
Well, let's take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and I want to do a little quiz that I have for you all, and then I want to talk about the whole idea of resurrection and how it manifests in this symphony. before we go. You're listening to Toledo Symphony Lab again. It is fundraising time at WGTE, so please do call up or log on to the website. You can make a donation at WGTE.org or 866-380-4664. And we're back with Toledo Symphony Lab talking about Gustav Mahler and his Symphony No. 2, the Resurrection Symphony. It's happening this weekend at the Peristyle, Friday and Saturday at 8 o'clock p.m. Elaine Trudell and the Toledo Symphony, along with soprano Sarah Schaefer, mezzo Susan Platz, also assembled choruses from the community that are performing as well this magnificent symphony, which bears the subtitle of the Resurrection Symphony. And I want to talk with the panel about the idea of resurrection and how it manifests in this particular symphony. But before we get there, we have a quiz. We have to have a quiz every single episode, especially when you're coming back, Effie. I have a quiz that I have assembled just with you in mind.
Just for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
And given that the College of Musical Arts is having their graduation ceremonies on Saturday as well, on the 17th, I have some music to go in the background that is just for you. This is for our quiz music.
Oh.
Okay.
Not by Mahler.
Not by Mahler.
But a Mahlerian.
Not even by Elgar, really, in this case, as you'll hear
I hope
shortly.
I didn't sound too disgusted when I heard it. I definitely let out an oh.
Yeah. If that's kind of like one of those, if I know music, then this is not music kind of quotes.
I thought you were going to play us more Mahler. I was excited.
No. We'll get some more Mahler in a moment here. Okay. This is called Who Said It? Mahler or Mozart?
Oh.
So I have different quotes, and you have to tell me if it was Mahler or if it was Mozart.
And this is just Effie playing, not me
Yeah.
or Merwin, right?
No, this is everybody.
At least
Darn
we have
it.
one.
The first
Chances of
one,
1 to 2 of getting it right.
Mahler or Mozart. This should be pretty simple. The first one is easy. A symphony must be like the world. It must contain everything.
That's Mahler.
Oh, yes. That's easy.
That's Mahler. But you didn't say it, Effie, so you didn't get that one.
Okay. I will give it
Zach
to
gets-
Merwin. Fine.
No, Zach got the point.
Oh, Zach got the point.
That's my
got the
last point, folks. I'll
Okay.
abstain the
One
rest.
for Z. Here we go. Here's a second quote. Destiny smiles upon me, but without making me the least bit happier. Mahler or Mozart?
Sounds like Mozart.
Yeah. I would go with Mozart.
Mahler.
That's Merwin. Good one.
I love these coin flip questions.
Okay.
I love it.
I am one of those who will go on doing till all doings are at an end. Mozart or Mahler?
Wow.
That really sounds like both of them, doesn't it?
Yes,
I
it could be.
Yeah, it really could.
Or any composer for that matter.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay.
I'll
Well,
say
pick
Mozart.
one.
I'll say Mozart.
Merwin is cleaning up. Okay, here's the next one. I cannot write poetically, for I am no poet. I cannot make fine artistic phrases that cast light and shadow, for I am no painter. I can neither by signs nor by pantomime express my thoughts and feelings, for I am no dancer, but I can by tones, for I am a musician. Remember, this is all translated from German, in both the case of Mozart and Mahler. Right, so
I think we're allowed to get this question wrong because we were all distracted by that weird snare drum thingy that just
I told
popped
you.
into the...
Yeah.
I told you it wasn't even Elgar. Well, take a guess. What do you say, Merwin?
Well, I kind of think Mahler was a poet because he wrote poetry, so I'm going to go with Mozart.
That is Mozart. I'm going to rename this quiz Mahler, Mozart, or Merwin. Right?
Oh, I never said anything that interesting.
Here's the next one. I pay no attention whatever to anybody's praise or blame. I simply follow my own feelings.
Wow, that feels like Mozart.
All right. One for Zach. I was a crazy young man who let himself be blinded by his passions and obeyed only the impulses of the moment.
Brad Cresswell.
Oh, very good.
No, he was talking in past tense. I'm still in the present tense.
Truth or dare? Come on.
Hey, we have an extra 10 minutes. I was a crazy young man who let himself be blinded by his passions and obeyed only the impulses of the moment. Anybody got a guess?
I would say Mahler, just because Mozart was only a young man.
Yeah, it was Mahler. Mahler at least made it into his early 50s, just about. If I were obliged to marry all those with whom I have jested, I should have at least 200 wives.
What?
That sounds like Mozart.
Mozart said that?
Yeah, I mean, according to BuzzFeed, or
BuzzFeed.
Oh.
No,
A noted
no.
musicological source, BuzzFeed.
It's not BuzzFeed. I did some research on all of this. That was a joke. Okay. Here's a good one. If you think you're boring your audience, go slower, not faster. These are quotes that they should have said. Right?
That sounds like Mahler.
Merwin, once again. Let's see. Maybe I'll just find one more. With the coming of spring, I am calm again.
Ooh.
We'll say Mahler.
That's Zach. Well, I mean, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions correct, the prize has to go to Merwin.
Yay. Oh, that's a lot better than the yays that I thought I was going to get.
Actually, I'll give you this one because this is a new addition to the soundboard. You know what that is?
No, we've never heard of that before.
That's the so-called Mahler death shriek that appears in this symphony a couple times. I'll give you the fuller version of it. Wait for it. Wait for it. Yeah, so that little gesture signifying, I've heard or I've read, signifying death. They call it the death shriek.
Not
Does that sound familiar to you, or did I just make that up?
I don't think I have heard this exact.
Well, there are a couple
expression,
shrieks. I mean,
but-
there's a shriek at the end of the third movement as well.
There's a lot of shrieking going on.
But which is one of my questions for Effie, is the way that the third movement ends. First of all, the third movement is, I think, in some ways the most fascinating, because it's this odd, very powerful scherzo with this gorgeous theme in the middle that doesn't seem to belong. He does amazing things with harp and trumpets. And then he finishes with this, one of the great cacophony in orchestral music.
And a very low sound.
Yeah.
And then the poor alto soloist has to come
follow
in.
that, yeah. Because it finishes with the tam, and I feel like it's a punctuation of something. I don't know what, though. And then we go into Urlicht.
Yeah.
It is a stunning moment. And of course, I don't know how many people at that moment expect that a voice is going to come in.
Yeah.
But that makes it even more stunning,
Yeah.
that all of a sudden you hear this very loud sound, then a very low sound in the orchestra, silence, and the soloist comes in with this ethereal sound, singing "Oh, Red Rose,"
Yeah.
which is one of the Wunderhorn songs. And the entire song depicts this kind of naive faith. It doesn't talk about God. It doesn't say anything about God specifically, other than it says, okay, I will return to God. Sorry, it says God there. But it's this image of heaven and of ascending, of eternal life, of blessed eternal life. And that's why Mahler really thought it was a great segue to the fifth movement.
I think it's worth knowing that it's stunning to me that Mahler is 28, 29, 30 when he's writing this. And he'd just been devastated by the deaths of his parents. And I think that with the second and the third movements, you're really talking about somebody who has lived through that. This one movement, the second movement, which is really like, it's almost like, reminiscing with your family members or your friends and thinking about this great memory that you had. And then the third movement is like, you have to go back and you have to go back into the real world, and it feels awful. And like, I think he chose, like, Saint Anthony speaking to the fishes, because people don't understand. Like, you're like, so there's this living that you're trying to go through. You have to go through this, but there's this emotional wrestling that's happening, and people don't understand what you're going through. And I think that third movement, in a way, there's that kind of like multi-layers where it's like there's this like almost like peaceful beginning where it's like, oh, everything is just fine, the fish are swimming around, and then underneath there's this just like emotional torture.
Give us a little, for people who don't know, what is the Anthony and the Fishes thing there? Tell us about that.
Well, I would actually defer to the musicological authority, but
It's okay,
there's no congregation. St. Anthony's has prepared, a sermon, and there is no congregation, so he is literally,
going to preach to the fish.
Because,
And the fish listened, and he says he was very happy. He gave a very nice sermon, and the fish listened. But at the end of the day, fish didn't change.
Yeah.
They remained the same.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of eventuality of you're listening to so many things around you. You go through so many things, but if you don't change,
and
then there's a
you
futility.
have a fish fry.
And this futility goes very
That's
well,
exactly
I think, with the idea of resurrection, that if everything is futile, something has to be there.
And I think it's very interesting because the original Wunderhorn song is nowhere near as pessimistic. No. Yeah. So I think that it's really informed this setting. The setting in the symphony is really informed, maybe even more so by the death of his mother, because he was able to, I think, at least come to some sort of terms with the death of his father. But he wasn't able to attend his mother's funeral.
And one of his sisters died at the same time. And by the time the symphony was completed, his brother had committed suicide. Yeah, there was a lot of pain in his life.
As a young man.
So do you think that the resurrection of the piece, the ending, the triumphal sort of ending, is his reaction to all of that pain in his life, his ultimate reaction to it?
Mahler is looking for literature. He doesn't care where it comes from. He is looking for words, for verses, anything that can capture the way he feels, and then set it to music. And so many times he writes in his letters, I'm trying to find the right text, and I'm looking in the Bible, I'm looking in literature, I'm looking into Faust, I'm looking into this book and that book. And he's trying to find something that he can grasp on and say, yes, this is exactly what I want in my music. But
was it the text he was looking for? Did the words have to read like he was hearing it in his mind, or was he looking for something to inspire him to write music?
I think he was reading for something to inspire him, for the text that was going to inspire him to say in his music what he wanted to say.
Wasn't there some hesitation, though, on his part to write a choral finale, just given comparisons to Beethoven?
I think he always wanted a choral finale for that specific symphony. At that point, Beethoven's Ninth was way in the past, and it was not something that was frowned upon. What is more interesting here, I think, with the idea of resurrection and Mahler being so caught into this vortex of ideas about resurrection and about life after death, is the fact that he was Jewish. And he was still Jewish when he was writing this symphony. He had not converted yet. So this idea of resurrection is something that he didn't grow up with. It was not part of his background, of his cultural background, of his cultural makeup, which again speaks to the idea that for him it was about something that interested him.
Yeah. It was a literary gesture.
A literary
that
gesture,
fit
yes.
with the overall tone of the symphony, the
Yes.
arc of the symphony.
Yes.
But one thing that I think is extraordinarily fascinating, you talk about his search for texts and how extensive those searches were. And I think it's amazing that after 6 years of sublimating his world into this symphony, he found texts and then he wrote his own. To finish, he wrote his own.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning it,
Yeah.
Merwin, because people forget that only the first 2 stanzas of the
Exactly.
last movement
Yeah.
are by Friedrich Klopstock,
Yeah.
this great German author. And then the rest of the movement, especially where the soloists come in, is Mahler. It's as if these floodgates have opened, and now that he has the opening to Auferstehen, now he can write his own glossing on Auferstehen.
Yeah.
Can you read it in translation, what his part of the poetry is?
Yes, it starts with the soloist singing, "Oh, I believe my heart, oh, believe nothing is lost with you. Yours is what you have desired, thine what thou hast loved, what thou hast fought for. Oh, believe you were not born in vain. Have you not lived in vain, suffered in vain?" And it ends with really a fantastic gloss on Klopstock's resurrection motif. "Rise again, you will rise again, my heart, in the twinkling of an eye. What you have fought for shall lead you to God."
Mm,
And the last word we hear is God.
right.
And it's a spectacular moment for chorus and soloists and orchestra.
Yeah, and it will be spectacular to be sitting in the audience and experience that. I'm playing a little bit of the... We're not quite at the point that you were talking about. We're playing a little bit of the final part of the last movement of the symphony here. And we'll end with the ending of it. But before we get to that, what else? What do you want people to know about this symphony and this experience before they go?
So this is, of course, our 75th anniversary season. So we've looked back into history at many points to determine a way to celebrate. And this is a symphony that has been used for celebration just because of its grandeur and everything that it achieves. If you know this symphony, it's very moving to see it performed live. If you don't know this symphony, it's very inspiring to see it performed live. And it affects people in really super musical ways. The symphony, the Toledo Symphony, that is, first performed this work 60 years ago. The conductor was Joseph Hawthorne, and he went to one of the symphony's supporters at the time to figure out whether they would be able to get enough money to perform the Mahler Second. And the original board of the symphony thought it was a very daring investment. It would require a lot of extra performers and singers, and it sounded very expensive. But Steve Stranahan brought every one of those trustees into his home to play the Mahler 2 and help them understand why this was artistically valuable and important for Toledo. Steve passed away in January of this year, and we are dedicating these performances to Steve's memory.
Yeah.
He was a wonderful supporter of the orchestra, and we really associate the life of the Mahler Second with Toledo, with his name and his efforts 60 years ago. And it has since been performed not just by Joseph Hawthorne, but Yuval Zaliuk in his first and last years as music director. Andrew Massey had a famous performance of it where the choir was seated behind the columns of the peristyle. Stefan Sanderling, of course, and now our wonderful Alain Trudel.
Yeah, and the whole symphony itself taking on an additional significance when you talk about Steve Stranahan and his investment in the symphony, and which still stands, his artistic legacy in our community.
Right.
Yeah, wonderful, beautiful tribute. Merwin, you have something you want to add?
Well, you mentioned Andrew Massey's name, and Andrew was the music director when I came to this orchestra, and also somebody very, very touched by the spirit of Mahler, and certainly I'll be thinking of Andrew and in these
Yeah.
moments. Is
who has passed away
Yes, yeah.
as well, for folks who don't know.
Yeah.
Effie, do you want to take the last word and just kind of give us a last-minute little Mahlerian take on what we have in store for us?
Sure. Mahler himself also thought very highly of this symphony. He loved to conduct it. It was the last piece he conducted in Vienna before he left in 1908 to come to the United States for his first season at the Metropolitan Opera and the New York Philharmonic. It was the last concert he conducted before he died in Paris on his way back to Vienna. And if I can channel Mahler here for a moment, I don't think it was because only it was such a painful experience for him to go through this entire symphony compositionally from beginning to end. It took him such a long time to complete. But it's also this idea of heaven and resurrection. Mm-hmm. And it's not about a religion. It's not about Christian heaven or any kind of afterlife in any other place or religious idea. It's about everybody's own heaven. What we think of heaven when we think visually or we sense heaven to be. And I would like to think that that's what it sounds like up there in heaven, what Mahler has composed.
Yeah, a world unto itself. And that world is recreated in everybody's mind, for themselves when they listen to Mahler's music. This concert is happening again Friday and Saturday, the 17th and 18th of May. At 8 o'clock p.m., it's at the Toledo Museum of Art, Paris-style. Symphony No. 2, the Resurrection Symphony of Gustav Mahler, Elaine Trudel, and the Toledo Symphony. Soloists Sarah Schaefer and Susan Platts, along with assembled choruses, performing music of Mahler. This program is a production of WGTE Public Media in collaboration with our sponsor, the Toledo Symphony. You can download episodes of our program as a podcast by going to our website at wgte.org/lab. You can also subscribe to us through your podcast app of choice, including Apple and Google Podcasts. My thanks to Zach Vassar, Merwin Sue, and Effie Papanikolaou. I'm Brad Cresswell. You've been listening to Toledo Symphony Lab from FM 91.